I didn't say a word. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just stood in the kitchen of the apartment I had saved for 3 years to buy, holding a dish towel, and listened to my sister-in-law tell me that she and her husband would be moving into my spare bedroom for a little while. My hands were completely steady. That part surprised me most. I set the dish towel on the counter. I poured her a glass of water. I said, "Let me think about it," and I smiled, and she hugged me, and the whole time I was thinking, she has no idea what she just started. Let me back up. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm 31 years old, I work as a contracts paralegal at a mid-size firm downtown, and 18 months ago I signed the papers on a 2-bedroom condo in a building 6 blocks from the lake. 11th floor. South-facing. I can see the water on clear days if I stand at the right angle near the kitchen window. I bought it alone. No cosigner. No gift from parents. I had been putting away 11% of every paycheck since I was 24, living in a studio with one working burner and a radiator that knocked all winter. I drove a car with a cracked dashboard. I packed lunch every single day. That condo was mine, every square foot of it, and I want you to understand that before I tell you what happened next, because the rest of this story only makes sense if you understand how much it cost me to get there. My husband. I'll call him my husband, though we had separated 8 months before any of this. His younger sister had always been a problem. Not obviously. Not in a way you could point to in the first year. She was charming when she wanted to be. She remembered birthdays, she sent nice texts, but she also had a pattern of borrowing money and forgetting it, of making decisions that affected other people without asking, of talking over everyone at dinner, while somehow making you feel like you were the rude one for noticing. Her husband was quieter, softer. He did whatever she said, when my marriage started falling apart. And that is a whole other story, one I don't have the energy to tell right now. She was not kind about it. She didn't call to check on me. She called my mother-in-law and reported everything I said in confidence. She told people at family gatherings that I had always been difficult. She did it with a smile, in that way people do when they want deniability. So when she showed up at my door in October with a bottle of wine and a sad story about how their lease had fallen through, and could they just stay 2 months, maybe 6 weeks even? We'll be so quiet, you won't even know we're here. I already knew exactly what kind of quiet she meant, but I said I would think about it. I did not say yes. I need you to understand that. I said I would think about it. And she heard yes, because that is how she operates. That is how she has always operated. She fills in the blanks with what she wants, and then acts confused when reality doesn't match. 4 days later, I came home from work to find a U-Haul idling in the loading zone in front of my building. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. I watched her husband carry a floor lamp through my lobby. I counted to 10. I called my friend Petra. Not from the list, a real friend, someone I had known since college, and I said, very calmly, "She moved in." Petra said, "Call the police." I said, "Not yet." She said, "Why not yet?" I said, "Because I want to understand what I'm dealing with first." What I was dealing with, I would come to understand over the next several weeks, was a great deal more than a lease that had fallen through. The first sign was small. I keep a very specific organizational system in my kitchen, not obsessive, just logical, everything in the same place it has always been. Within a week, things started migrating. My good knife moved to the wrong drawer. The shelf I used for my coffee things got colonized by her protein powder and her vitamins and 3 different kinds of herbal tea. When I mentioned it, gently she laughed and said I was being so Taipei and turned back to her phone. The second sign was the thermostat. I keep it at 68 at night because I sleep better in the cold. I started waking up sweating at 2 a.m. It was set to 74. When I reset it, it would be back to 74 by morning. The third sign was my parking spot. I pay $210 a month for an assigned underground spot. She started parking her husband's truck in it, just temporarily, while they figured out the parking situation. When I pointed out that there was a guest lot 2 blocks over, she said she didn't feel safe walking that far at night. I said I understood, And I said it needed to stop by Friday, and on Friday the truck was still there. I did not escalate. I did not argue. I made a note in a document I had started keeping on my phone with dates and times and exactly what was said. I called a locksmith friend of mine. His name is not in your database either, and I'll call him the locksmith because that is what he is. And I asked him some questions about documentation and property rights. He referred me to someone else. That someone else referred me to a property attorney named Mr. Callahan. I want to be precise. That was his actual function, not his name, but he was the kind of attorney who had seen this exact situation before and was not surprised by any of it. Mr. Callahan asked me if I had a written lease agreement with my sister-in-law. I did not. He asked if I had anything in writing, any text message, any email, where I had explicitly agreed to let her stay. I thought about it. I had said I would think about it. I had never said yes, and I had the text messages to prove it. He said, "Good. Do not say yes in writing. Do not accept any money from her. If she offers rent, decline it politely. Do not create a tenancy." I said, "What do I do in the meantime?" He said, "Document everything. And don't change the locks yet." Not yet. That word kept coming up. The weeks went on. She started having people over on weeknights. Not parties, just friends, 2 or 3 at a time, but late and loud. Her husband took up the entire second bathroom with his gym equipment. She rearranged my living room without asking because the old layout didn't flow. One evening I came home and there were candles burning on my dining table, and her friends were sitting around it having dinner, and I was so startled I actually stopped in the doorway and just blinked. She waved at me like I was a neighbor dropping by. "Oh, we saved you a plate," she said. Like I had been invited. Like this was her home and I was the guest. I took the plate. I sat down. I smiled. I ate. I was shaking a little under the table, but I smiled. After everyone left, I went to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in all of this, I let myself feel it. The helplessness. The embarrassment. The rage. I let it move through me, and I thought about the years it had taken me to buy that place, and I thought about the folder on my phone, and then I got up, washed my face, and went to sleep. The next morning, I called Mr. Callahan again. I said, "I think I'm ready to talk about next steps." He said, "Tell me what changed." I told him about the dinner party. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I wrote down. "She's not behaving like a guest. She's behaving like a resident. The longer that continues without documentation and action, the harder it becomes to untangle." He told me he had done some preliminary research. He told me that there might be a way to handle this more quietly or more publicly, depending on what I wanted. He asked what mattered most to me. I said I wanted her out. Permanently. With a clear record of what happened, so she could not rewrite it later. He said, "Then we need to be patient for a little while longer. There's something we should know first." What we needed to know, it turned out, had to do with a storage unit. I had mentioned to Mr. Callahan in passing that my sister-in-law had asked me, in the first week, if she could use that little storage closet near the building entrance. I had said I was using it. She had not brought it up again, but I had noticed the lock had been different. A small, wrong-colored padlock where mine used to be. I assumed I was misremembering. I was not misremembering. Mr. Callahan had a colleague who specialized in tenant disputes, and that colleague made a few calls, and what came back was this: the storage unit, which was included in my deed, had been used, without my permission, to store several items that did not belong to me. And more importantly, there was documentation suggesting my sister-in-law had represented herself, in correspondence with the building manager, as a co-owner of the unit. Not a guest. Not a temporary resident. A co-owner. She had told the building manager that her name would be added to the lease soon, and that she was handling some administrative things for the property. She had said this to explain why she needed a fob for the gym and access to the package room. She had said this in writing. I sat with that for a long time. This was not a woman who had fallen on hard times and needed somewhere to land. This was a woman running a very deliberate play, and the fact that she had done it so casually, so confidently, told me she had done it before, or at least that she had thought about it very carefully in advance. I told Mr. Callahan I was ready to move. He said not yet, one more week. He needed to put some paperwork in order, coordinate with the building management office, and make sure we had everything documented before we served her with anything. That week was the hardest. Because that week, my mother-in-law called. She called to tell me, in her gentle and completely devastating way, that she hoped I wasn't going to make things difficult for my sister-in-law, who was going through a very stressful time. She told me that family is family. She told me that I had always been a little rigid about my space. She told me that my sister-in-law had mentioned I seemed tense. I listened to the whole thing. I said, I appreciate you calling. I said, I'm sure everything will work out. I did not tell her what was coming. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. Then I called Petra and said, tell me something good. She said, it's almost over. She was right. On a Tuesday afternoon, I arranged to be out of the apartment. I told my sister-in-law I had a work thing and would be back late. She texted back a thumbs up and a little sun emoji. Mr. Callahan coordinated with the building. The building manager was present. A process server was present. A locksmith. My locksmith friend, the original one, was present. My sister-in-law came home at 5:15 to find the locks had been changed and a legal notice on the door. She called me 11 times in 14 minutes. I watched my phone light up in the passenger seat of Petra's car, where I was sitting outside a coffee shop 3 miles away, eating a lemon bar, not answering. On the 12th call, I picked up. She was not quiet. She was not the woman who brought wine and smiled and called me type A. She was furious in a way I had never heard from her. A real fury, undisguised for the first time. And in that fury she said several things that confirmed every single thing I had suspected about how deliberate this had all been. I let her talk. When she was done, I said very calmly, you have 72 hours to collect your belongings with a building escort. After that, anything left will be considered abandoned property. Mr. Callahan will be sending a full accounting to your email address. I'd recommend reviewing it with your own attorney. She said, you can't do this. I said, I already did. I hung up. Petra said, how do you feel? I thought about it for a second. I looked out the window at the parking lot. A woman was walking a very old dog very slowly across the asphalt, and the dog kept stopping to smell things, and the woman just waited, patient, letting the dog take all the time it needed. I said, tired, and okay. That was the truest thing I had said in months. The accounting that Mr. Callahan sent was thorough. It documented the unauthorized representation to building management, the use of the storage unit, and a claim for the cost of the parking spot she had occupied for 9 weeks. It also included a formal notice that any attempt to re-enter the property would result in a trespassing report filed with the police. She retrieved her belongings in 2 trips, supervised, and did not speak to me, her husband. And I do feel something for him. I do. Because he was not a bad person, just a person who had learned to go along. Looked at me once, across the lobby, and gave me a look that was hard to read. Not angry. Something more complicated than that. I nodded at him. He nodded back. They left. My mother-in-law did not call again for 3 weeks. When she did call, she did not mention any of it. We talked for 12 minutes about a television show she was watching. I think that was the closest she could come to an apology, and I accepted it for what it was. The storage unit lock is mine again. The thermostat stays at 68. My good knife is back in the right drawer. I want to tell you something I didn't expect. The night after everything was resolved, after the paperwork was filed and the building manager had confirmed the new access codes, and I had finally exhaled for what felt like the first time since October. I sat on my kitchen floor. Not dramatically. I just slid down the cabinet and sat there. And I thought about the woman I had been at 24, Packing her lunch, riding out the cold, putting money away in small amounts for a future she couldn't entirely see yet. I thought, she did this. She made this possible. Not just the apartment. All of it. The steadiness, the patience, the ability to hold the long view when everything around you is designed to make you react. I'm not perfect. I was scared through most of it. There were nights I woke up at 3 in the morning and lay in the dark, wondering if I was making the right call, if I was being too slow, if I should have just changed the locks on day 4 and been done with it. But I think the waiting mattered. I think doing it correctly, completely, in a way that left no ambiguity and no opening for her to claim she was wronged. I think that mattered. Not for her sake. For mine. She knows exactly what she did. She knows I know, and she knows I handled it in a way that leaves her nothing to argue against. Not with the building, not in court, not in any family conversation that might happen at some future holiday where we are all expected to pretend. That's not nothing. The lemon bar, by the way, was excellent. I went back the next week and got another one, and I sat at a window table this time, and the lake was visible down the street, at exactly the right angle, and the light was very good. And I stayed there longer than I needed to because I could, because the place I was going home to was mine, because nobody was waiting to rearrange my furniture, or use my parking spot, or fill the thermostat with 74 degrees of someone else's comfort. I drove home when I was ready. I went up to the 11th floor. I made dinner in my kitchen, with my good knife, and I ate it at my table, alone, in the quiet I had built from scratch, and it tasted like everything I had been waiting for.